Good day and welcome. So today in this video, I feel like I want to talk or reflect on an image I've been seeing yesterday in my mind. Feels that is connected or coming also from a process, maybe starting from like yesterday, making some videos. I was observing myself, watching my own videos, trying to find the title to it. But listening to myself, I noticed it's interesting to observe myself as when I am talking like this, I am in some flow. It feels different than when I'm afterwards actually observing this. And so I was then from the observer stance looking at my reasoning, my thinking. It feels very having that kind of a spiraling motion. Feel that sort of reflections it brought me later on yesterday. Felt like there was a storm outside, walked through the storm as well, but and then with the thunder, the lightning, felt this brought some kind of insight. um, as I was laying in my bed, I saw this image in my head. Well, it actually also made me think about, call it fishing for thought. I was seeing how through this kind of spiraling motion, it is as if you can build a sort of a fishing pole, but as we are fishing for thought, we are aiming this pole towards the sky, into heaven. There is a certain way my mind seems to be doing this. I feel I was reflecting on that and how um, it's as if I program my mind in some way to have some kind of a pattern, follow that pattern, and then you sort of let it move and it structures itself. You sort of like let it reach into the sky, project it in towards infinity or until it reaches something, catches a fish. And so then also this is I'm explaining the imagery I saw in my mind. But so then seeing as you catch on to this thought, this fish, um, you can bring it down. Then it felt like, well, you do not want to be standing underneath that as it comes down. You do not want to understand this because it will crush you. I see that in the imagery, but it's interesting to think about this when to put this in other words, when we have a sort of a higher insight, something from the heavens, which we currently are maybe not really able to understand with our own worldview, our own understandings, our own ego, our own mind. If we try to grasp that, if we try to understand that in its original form, it will quite literally often burn you. Or also, what often comes is some kind of a puking, nausea feeling. That I feel that is often also related with our own or the process of our own understanding of reality, our own ego as well, our own worldview, deconstructing and reconstructing, and it's like that rebirthing of it is already going on. But so the seeds of thought, I find it interesting to look at them as seeds as well, and then feel there is wisdom in this to just let those seeds come to the ground and then also give them time let them let them grow, let them. It's like planting that seed within our reality, which can then over time take root. Not all of the seeds will take root, maybe also not all of them at the same time. But I feel that is then a much more stable form of doing all this. Made me reflect a bit on my own processes as well. I feel younger versions of me maybe tried often to instantly understand these kind of things, but that is quite intense. Maybe sometimes also certainly impossible. It feels like there is a lot of wisdom, or there is a lot of wisdom that has matured within me to also just let these things grow on their own time. But certainly this kind of process, because I feel like this is actually also what I'm doing with a lot of these reflections. It is in a way fishing, just using my mind as a sort of a tool. You set off some kind of direction and you let it go, and then bring something back, and that can then be a sort of a seed. Maybe in some way every video is a seed like that. And then I thought of, feels like creating all of this is in some way like planting a whole garden. You're just seeding it, and we'll see what grows from that. Also the imagery of like laying down bricks and building something, maybe building a temple, each video being one brick, also not necessarily making too much sense on their own, but feel like it is building up to something, connecting them all together eventually. So we keep on building, and so I was adding on to all this imagery, it continuing my reflections on that. It made me think about a lot about this. Also connects with unity, but so the spiraling motion itself, looking at that, how looking at the spiral, it has this straight component, sort of the direction as well, maybe like the masculine axis, and then around that you have this spiraling motion, the more feminine aspect. Together in union, we can then use this. And so I seem to have, well, transformed my mind into letting my mind operate in such a way. But what can we do with this? Well, it opens up a whole new way of thinking, a whole new land of perspectives with that. And often, and like earlier today during my walk, I was reflecting a lot on. So this kind of spiraling, it also actually made me think about like a drill, and then it made me think about how in some way I'm with my mind, projecting my mind into reality, connecting with reality. It's like drilling into reality, but there are different ways of doing this. Certainly I felt like, again, a younger version of me would often try to force my mind, and then the drill is much more forcing, trying to get through, trying to reach an answer in that way. Whereas now the feeling of how my mind actually operates, and I'm also experiencing this, it's interesting to talk about this, but you would really have to experience it yourself to truly understand. But so now it actually feels often like actual love making with reality inside of my mind, using my mind. There's a bit that like penetration feeling, projecting my mind while being received into reality. And it's like a love making with reality itself, giving and receiving, asking questions and receiving answers at the same time in a very loving, non forcing, free way. And so, also in imagery, what I was seeing often was, well, it made me think about like piercing the veil or trying to get to different layers of reality, different perspectives that come with that. But feel like reality is layered, and there are these veils that are separating that. Um, Maybe within each layer there are still even more sub layers. But anyways, I was thinking about the veil itself, how it's not necessarily completely closed off. It seems to have these kind of sort of gates or very like pores. That also explains the dynamic I see. But again, a pore, sort of a pore, I also see it actually as in a sort of a spiraling gate. And then, well, with our own consciousness, we can try to pierce the veil by using brute force. Most likely, psychedelics can actually create things like that, or also types of yoga and meditation. But what I've certainly also, or what I'm experiencing now much more, which also makes it that I don't really feel like I need such practices right now. If we find the right key to that sort of a keyhole, the pore being the keyhole, we just have to like wrap our mind in the right format, and then we can actually move through it smoothly in a very non-forcing way. And the pores can be different, like sometimes it can be a lot wider or very small and subtle, which may require a different type. Because I was also thinking about, for example, pressure. If our consciousness is operating on one layer and pressure is building, maybe our circumstances, our environment makes us uncomfortable within this, creates this heat within, pressure rises, it wants us, like we start to feel this uncomfortable feeling within that layer, which can then cause that consciousness to start to spiral through those pores in a sort of a sweating into the next layer. It's interesting because it makes me think about a lot of the storms I went through, often feeling very fiery, feeling very, well, the transformational feeling, but it's because the sweating feeling is to me reminding me of like a sauna, and we're actually moving through those kind of gates of the veil, moving into the next layer. it also made me think about how, well, like in made me think about like a kundalini rising sort of a process, and how we can sort of a distinction between we can be more prepared for this, and well, we can just go through it, but how that is also a difference. For example, when you have one layer and the environment, the consciousness within that layer, if it is still quite toxic, and then you start sweating into the next layer, moving through those pores, how that can bring that kind of toxicity into that layer as well, which has a, well, the other layers have often more powers to them, or less power depending on how you look at them, but that same toxicity can then start to play out in a similar way, but a bit maybe more magnified. So that's also maybe why some would say it is wiser to clean yourself or purify yourself before really going through all those processes. But we each go our own way, and then we deal with what comes on the way, I guess. Also made me thinking again about like this drill bit. So in some way, like a lot of these reflections, it feels like I'm drilling. It made me think, so each video seems in a way, it's like you start somewhere and then you set off in a certain direction, you move through that and you explore along the way, and it opens us up to something, and then something can maybe flow through that. Feel something like this is going on, but I guess things are also still becoming visible. Also, I was thinking another way of seeing this is maybe like a cork screw, because what I'm actually describing here feels like also this kind of ascension within ourselves, or like raising in consciousness within ourselves as we move through layer from layer to layer. And it feels like often initially it is a process of we get uncomfortable in a certain layer. It always moves together with our own environment as well, which is interesting because we can actually speed up this process if we're very conscious about this and then start to consciously choose our environment. That's not necessarily what I want to go into right now, but as we move from layer through layer, it's often an experience of we get uncomfortable, which actually sets that transformation in motion, which makes us move. It's like opening up the gates to the next layer. It does feel like once you have made that connection through, it is, that's why I maybe think about the corkscrew, how it's like this is the way to get through the keyhole, but then you can actually open the gate and much more energy can flow through. And that's the process of going layer to layer. Also, there is a rising, and then also letting that come down to the ground again. Feels like this is the ascension process in becoming whole ourself, becoming more conscious through all those layers of our own self, which enables us to become more conscious of all those layers of reality itself. It's a whole process, because often it's like Maybe part of us wants to escape a certain layer, which actually is a driver that brings us into the next one. But I don't feel like we're supposed to then only live in this other one. We're actually supposed to integrate all of them and bring them then all together as one. And that is then the embodied wholeness. This is then also what I've been reflecting on, how that's the key to these earlier visions I've been describing, like a world in unity. The participants, the people in that world, are living in that unity within themselves, are becoming more whole themselves. And so, in many ways, creating that world is a healing journey. The healing journey being becoming more whole ourselves, and that goes very much together with our reality. I am thinking now about like some videos from yesterday I made, and it made me think about my process, how initially I had this sort of a vision, seeing a world what is possible, and then it gave me that feeling of, oh, I want to live in that world. But looking at my self-talk again, I realize as well where I am at right now. Surely I still want to create such a world of unity, but I actually feel whole in where I am now. I actually feel like this life I'm living right now, here in this moment as well, this is actually where I want to be right now. And that is, I feel the culmination of also letting that rise within me and then bring it back down. It's like gaining all those insights, what is all possible, but also coming back to the ground and actually learning to be whole in the world how it is right now. Not needing necessarily the world to change so that we can feel whole. I've been feeling that for many years, but it is a real burden. However, I like it's part of the process, I would say. But now it's becoming much more clear and making sense. And maybe I still feel sometimes a lot of tiredness from actually carrying that burden, as I feel now, having released it, it's actually letting that peace still settle within me. And now building from here, it feels like I can already build from completion. Thinking as well is much more calmer instead of needing to find answers or needing to find insight. It feels like a much more clearer, freer exploration, which with it brings a whole lot more fun and joy, and that is very pleasant for myself as well. Well, so thank you. That was the same, something I actually realized from making these videos yesterday. Just as I now said thank you as well, making this feels like a gift to myself, and that in itself is still a little bit weird to experience this. It's a bit new still, but it's very pleasant to create from this. The creation itself feels like a completion to me, and which also gives me the feeling of like I can keep doing this, and so I'm finding a bit of a balance, because part of me could keep going creating this and keep flowing like this, but I also have to do some other things, I guess, and pace myself a bit and find the proper balance like that. But overall, it's very nice, very peaceful. So there, I'll leave it. Have a good one.